I wasn't gonna do a video on this episode of One Piece, but people are pissed. Is it a lot of people? It depends, right? On where you go for a lot of your online entertainment One Piece fix. And I tend to go on Twitter, and oh my God, there are people that are like, oh, Toei fell off. This is disgusting. How dare you? It is not 1-to-1 with the manga, you fiends. Okay. Let's just dial it down. But I can understand why, because right now we are in a very sensitive time as One Piece fans as a whole. There are cats that are not necessarily engaged right now with Elbaf. Also for the anime, it's been some time since the actual anime has been ongoing. Lo and behold, when it comes back, we expect a lot of dope quality changes because of various news outlets say X, Y, Z, and the other, because of the new time slot changes and so on and so forth. By no means is it bad. By no measure is this bad. But are things different? Outside of Frankie's voice actor, which will take some time to adjusting to that, for sure, are things somewhat different compared to the manga version? Yes. Is that okay? It depends. And the reason why is simple. With a story like One Piece, the primary canon material is the what? The manga. The anime is an adaptation of the manga. So things will be different. You'll see a lot of folks complain, well, it has to be 1-to-1 parallel with the manga. But on the flip side, they won't say a damn thing when the added anime content is even better than what the manga has done. Like, for example, with that Gear 5 Luffy power-up before he blitzes Rob Lucci, bro. Come on, one of the best power-ups we've ever seen in fiction. To expect a 1-to-1 parallel with the manga at all times is asking for a bit much, particularly when with One Piece and how it's paced with the anime, and I'm assuming it's still going to apply for even the new time slot for One Piece. The fact of the matter is that you're doing one episode per one chapter. You don't want the anime to catch up to the manga. But if you do, let's say, like what most anime do, to where they have several chapters that encompass one episode, we're gonna have a situation here where we're gonna need filler. Massive amounts of filler. Very rarely do you see an anime go past beyond the manga material when it's using that manga material as its foundation. One example would be like Bungo Stray Dog Season 5, but these are rare examples. More often than not, this will not happen. And Oda will probably never give the Toei staff the 4-on-1 on what he plans to do for the future in the manga. The fact of the matter too is that we had a huge One Piece break, an anime break, yes, but also keep in mind the fact that Oda himself has taken quite a few breaks. So right now on Toei's part, there really isn't any onus to shove in multiple chapters per episode to make the pace better overall, because again, right now in the manga, it's still not that far off from the anime is. So things have to be dragged out, details added and embellished or downgraded, depending on, to make things work for a 24 minute segment. That all being said, when you go to chapter 1092, which is the chapter that this episode is based off of. And again, some of these differences were so noticeable and WTF, apparently, that it did catch the ire of a lot of folks online. The first one that stood out to me was during the Gear 4 Snake Man versus Kizaru segment. The animation was actually pretty good, and this was of course now Toshishida, but only for the second half of that when he does the Black Mamba stuff on Kizaru. The first half of that is not now Toshishida, which is very surprising because the animation style looks very similar to now Toshishida. However, we find out that it's done by an animator named Sorakawa Mitsu, and Sorakawa Mitsu, like myself, is a now Toshishida stan, but unlike myself, actually has the dexterity to draw and make some pretty damn good artwork. Whoa! And this episode was Sora's debut. Shout out to my boy Swaggin for the intel. So remember the episode when we saw the Seraphim ordered by Rob Lucci to destroy most of the lab? That style of animation seemed very similar to the style of animation that we saw with Kid's damn punk that he fired in the future that never happened. Well, that animation that we have for damn punk with Kid is Aki Toshihiro Ota. But with the Rob Lucci scene ordering the Sephron to destroy the lab, that was done by not Ota, but someone else that likes to emulate Ota's style. A fanboy, fangirl, disciple, I forgot who exactly, but just how Kobe Bryant copied Michael Jordan's style in many respects to be the great player that he was. And my boy Kawhi Leonard, my New Balance GOAT, he is doing very similar things to Kobe because he was trained by Kobe, which also incorporates that Michael Jordan style. It's the same thing here. But now Toshi also plays a role in this episode too, and now Toshi is the one that actually has the sort of Black Mamba volley on Kizaru that Kizaru casually blocks. Now, this is not in the manga. The Black Mamba move, the one that Katakuri instantly tightrope walked through like a stud, and the one that Kaido takes too, well, the Black Mamba is what we see Kizaru effectively block in the episode. So that was an added detail that surprised me. And of course, Admiral fanboys are taking that and running to the hills with it. But that is the nature of the BC when it comes to the anime and manga differences, where again, things will be added in the anime to make things work on a 1 episode per 1 chapter basis. But the knife cuts both ways. It's a double-edged sword. Where after the Black Mamba barrage, there's a moment where Luffy sticks his tongue out like he's tired. Like this. Why is he doing that? I thought it was a very interesting detail because it does, I think, coincide to a moment in the future we're gonna be getting from chapter 1106, where Luffy, we get to see him actually fight when he has a full tummy. A full tummy Luffy is a full power Luffy. And because we see Luffy in this episode right here going, after doing the Black Mamba, which at this point in time, considering his skills and how much he's improved since Whole Cake Island, the first time he used that technique, he shouldn't be tired, not at all. But yet here he is, tired. Why is he tired? Think. And that is a detail that kind of cuts in my favor in my agendas, and I love to see it. So those are some details that they did change and add compared to the manga. And by the way, the Kizaru acceleration kick, that was nice. That was some high quality animation. And if anyone says otherwise, they've lost their damn minds. Absolutely. However, I can't say the same thing for the end, where not in terms of animation, but in terms of folks losing their minds. At the very end of the episode, they redo the end of chapter 1092. And while Kizaru is talking to Vegapunk and everyone's freaking the hell out, you have that one kaboom, one panel of Vegapunk's surprise. They have Luffy going, that hurt, and then just immediately grabs Kizaru. The time window, the time frame between when Luffy busts through the lavostratum barrier, gets lasered again by that barrier, and then he grabs Kizaru in the manga, it seems to be relatively quickly. Like, that's the way it kind of feels in the manga. That window of time is so small, it's hard for Kizaru to react. And he gets grabbed up, he gets yeeted like a Toy Story doll. And of course, obviously you have the bug eyes, everyone's freaking out, oh my god, whoa! And so on and so forth. But you could argue, and maybe that's why we have the difference between the manga and the anime, you could argue that that scene could be a little bit too cluttered. Oda's paneling nowadays is way more cluttered than it used to be, let's say compared to back in the pre-time skip days, or let's say early post-time skip days. Nowadays, there's so much going on per panel. I mean, we even see in that chapter, Alice is covered by the dome sound effect, and even though she's going bug-eyed, it's literally covering her face. But in the anime, what they do is that, okay, instead of having all this cluttered stuff, they just have every person have the bug-eyed feature, and it's kind of like a slideshow where it goes from person to person to person to person to person, which is not the most flattering animation, but it is a way to show everyone's shocked reaction with the same pop-up eye motion. And then you have Kizaru's kind of like, But what is odd though is that there's a lead up to it where in the anime you have Luffy doing his usual sort of fiendish Heath Ledger Joker laughs. And he starts going like bananas, cuckoo for the frosted version of Cocoa Puffs, and he's just losing it. And then Kizaru is kind of thinking, wait a minute, looking around, hold on, it can't be. Is that Masaka? Out comes Luffy almost silently. After all of the maniacal laughing and the Looney Tunes shenanigans, stuffily just grabs Kizaru, yoink, and then that's that. The interpretation is, you can argue, very different in the anime. Luffy's able to almost cut off his presence and grab Kizaru, which is why Kizaru didn't react in time at all, even though he had plenty of time to react compared to the manga version. It's a bit funky. It's a bit weird. Remember the first time Kaido and Luffy fought at the very beginning of Wano Country? In the manga version, Kaido just speed blitzed the piss out of Luffy. Dash through, boom, right, man? Ugh. Done. In the anime version, they have Luffy go King Kong gun, and then Kaido goes Thunder Bagua, and then there's a cross shot between the two attacks, and then Kaido Thunder Bagua outdoes Luffy's King Kong gun. The manga and anime versions of those two moments are very different. Anime scene of Luffy kind of quietly grabbing Kizaru versus the manga version where he's like, ah! Yeet, grab, that's the end of the story. Well, when I say quietly, I mean more like there were other sound effects that were going on, and Kizaru kind of seemed confused, as if like he was hearing the same sound effects that we were hearing, the sort of Looney Tunes and the Goof Troop sound effects and the yoinking and the pulling and the drumming and so on. And then that kind of confuses Kizaru, and then he gets caught, but it's like a quiet catch. So it's hard to tell if it was, let's say, more like a stealth grab, or was like a confused, wait, Looney Tunes, what's going on right now? And then he gets Roger Rabbited. It's weird. It is weird, but that's why you could interpret it in different ways compared to the manga version, where it seems pretty cut and dry. I think it does come with the territory. If you expect to get everything 1-to-1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1, I think you lost your damn mind. Where again, unless you want filler that goes for just as long as the Fishman Island logs or even longer, so there's enough time for Oda, who normally takes a lot of breaks for the manga, which only extend then the filler time, because again, there has to be enough canon manga material for the anime to adapt. Unless you want that filler, there are going to be modifications, because that's how the ongoing game works. I.e., for example, I have not watched it, and I don't plan on to, but I know that a lot of folks have issues with Boruto, where Boruto has a metric ton of filler. I believe even more filler than the actual canon material for the anime. So Toei and One Piece opt for the extended pace of an episode to match a chapter's length, rather than have extended amounts of filler for months and months and months or years on end. So depending on the director of episodes, sometimes some directors don't do that great of a job at all of pacing out scenes, let's say in an artistic or systematic way, to where they feel relatively good, even though they're only covering one chapter per one episode. One scene that I thought was very awkward compared to the manga was the scene with Sanji and Jinbei. Vegapunk is talking to Sanji and Jinbei while Kizaru has already teleported in effectively. He's already kicked Luffy into the Labostratum barrier, and then he's already darted off after Frankie had his failed Radical Beam moment, and then Bonnie gets also yeeted, punted into the barrier. We see Sanji and Jinbei, they're still next to Vegapunk, and then Vegapunk tells them to go grab the boxes. But in the manga chapter version of this, Jinbei and Sanji are nowhere in sight, because Jinbei and Sanji had already left to another part of the lab to go and get those boxes in the manga chapter version of that. So in the anime version, it's really awkward, because you're like, hold on, wait, whoa, time out. Considering how both Sanji and Jinbei can use observation haki, particularly Sanji, who is very attuned to this hockey type, how are they not sensing Kizaru right now? Huh? Kizaru, who teleports in only a few moments, like less than a minute or a minute after Sanji and Jinbei run to get the stuff so they can depart. That's what I mean about really kind of thinking about the direction and the flow of how things should operate based on the manga chapter version. And of course, not let's say just this chapter in of itself, but also the previous chapter and the upcoming chapter, where we should do things and rearrange things based on this content as a whole. And I feel like, again, some directors can do a good job of this, others don't. And even though some scenes are pretty damn good, I won't deny that, other scenes I think did need, in terms of not animation, but in terms, well, animation wise, Akainu and Kuma, Mango! And he was stiff, man. Buddy froze in midair. Only his magma was moving. He just froze. I'm like, what the? But outside of Akainu and Kuma playing Microsoft PowerPoint, Blue Lock Season 2, up until the finale, which is amazing. With all that being said, I understand the game. I'll take the good with the bad. That's how you have to roll things. That is how the ongoing anime adaptation game goes. The One Piece in the future, they are gonna probably be seasonal. So when it comes to pace, they should be a lot better off. A lot better off. But until then, if they ever get to this, let's say in 2055, when they get to this, that pace will be better. Fair enough, fine. But again, take the bad with the good. There is plenty of great in this episode, for sure. But is the entire episode dog water because a few things were out of balance? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But let me know your stance on the subject matter at hand. If you enjoy your boys' video content, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna catch you guys and gals on the flip side.
See you. Bye-bye.